Hi, I'm Father Joe. Recently I bought a used car, from a priest friend of mine who was an exorcist, but the car, it was repossessed. I suppose I shouldn't tell you it was a gremlin. All right, this week. Dear Father Joe, I am really confused about forgiveness. I know we are supposed to forgive everyone, but what does that mean? My marriage counselor is telling me something different, I think, so please help. This is a good question and a tough issue. I recently had this discussion with my students at school, and I think the insights that I share, I know a lot of them told me afterward, it really helped. So we'll take it a step at a time. Step one, we are called by Jesus to forgive always and everywhere. No matter what, we are called to forgive. This is important. In terms of forgiveness, I think one of the reasons it's so important is, well, obviously because Jesus commanded it, but also because when we're able to forgive others, I think it's easier for us to receive forgiveness from God. So that's step one. We always forgive. Now, step two, though, is that while we are called to always forgive, we may not be able to reconcile. What's the difference? Forgiveness only requires one person and God, right? You and I can pray for God to help us forgive a person. The other person doesn't have to be a part of it at all. Forgiveness is when we let go of the power of an event or a person in our past to control our future or our present. It's when we let go and say, God, help me. Now, reconciliation is when the relationship is restored. And you know, there are people who can assault our dignity that God has called us to protect. And with that in mind, while we need to forgive them, we may not be called to reconcile with them. It's an important thing. Reconciliation takes two people and God. Forgiveness takes one person and God. Now, it's essential that we keep in mind, in terms of reconciliation, that our God-given dignity is something we must protect. For example, when you talk about what your marriage counselor said, if you are a victim of abuse, it's important that you forgive, and it is not important that you reconcile until that person's life changes. You have to protect your dignity that God gave you. Someone saying they're sorry is a good and holy thing, but actions need to change before reconciliation can take place. So, how do we forgive? Even if we can't reconcile, how do we forgive? Let's keep a couple simple rules in mind. Number one, we don't have to pretend we're not hurt. If someone hurts us, if someone damages the relationship, we don't have to pretend it didn't happen. I know I have said hurtful things to people and I always say, I ask your forgiveness. And if they say, oh, it's all right, or it's okay, I don't feel so good about that because it wasn't all right. It wasn't okay. It's okay to acknowledge our hurt in terms of forgiveness. That doesn't mean we don't forgive. It means we have a heart. The second thing to keep in mind is that we need to be vigilant about protecting our God-given dignity. Now, the last thing that we got to keep in mind is forgiveness is a process, not a moment. There are people in my life that I've had to forgive and that I'm still working at every day saying, God, help me forgive so-and-so. The first step is when we desire to forgive a person. Or, God help us, we may have to pray for the desire to forgive. That's fine. That's starting on the process. So we want the desire to forgive, and then we ask God for the ability to forgive. And we understand that this might take a long time. Keep in mind, there will come a day when we recognize that through God's grace we have gotten stronger and we're ready to move on. Now here's a cool thing. God's forgiveness of us is effortless and instantaneous. You and I have to work for it. God doesn't. And we can enjoy that every day of our lives. Enjoy another day in God's presence.